There's a moment you'll remember, not because it was loud, but because something inside you broke, quietly. You walked away from a conversation and realized you had just defended yourself again, trying to explain what you meant. Why you said it, why you didn't mean harm, why you're not that person, and somewhere deep down, something in you whispered, "Oh, why do I always feel like the one on trial?" You've done it your whole life, tried to be reasonable, fair, clear. But no matter how right you are, the more you explain, the smaller you feel. You think you're fixing the misunderstanding, but really, you're telling them they had the right to question you in the first place. That's the trap. And it's not just about winning arguments, it's about power, because the moment you defend yourself, you hand over the frame. But what if you didn't? What if silence wasn't weakness, but the ultimate show of control? That's where this begins. Not with words, but with the moment you choose not to flinch. They taught you that being misunderstood was dangerous. That silence was suspicious, that if someone accused you of something, even something absurd, you needed to explain, quickly, clearly. Because if you didn't, people might believe it, and that fear has been running your life. You see it everywhere. Someone makes a subtle jab in a meeting, someone online twists your words, a friend questions your intent, and what do? You lean forward, you defend, you clarify, not because you're guilty, but because deep down, you think being seen as a wrong is a threat to your identity. You've been trained to survive by being understood, but here's the brutal truth. The more you explain yourself, the less powerful you look. Because explaining doesn't create clarity, it creates hierarchy. You may be right, you may be innocent. But the very act of defending tells the world you believe their judgment matters more than your presence. And once you do that, you're no longer in control. You've placed your worth on trial. Think about the last time someone came at you sideways. A vague insult, a joke, a post meant to stir, and you responded. You crafted the perfect explanation. You laid out your intent, and somehow you still felt smaller afterward. That's not coincidence. That's the invisible surrender. Because here's what most people miss. When you explain, you reinforce the idea that others get to define you. And people can feel it. They can smell the subtle desperation in every "that's not what I meant," every "please let me clarify." It doesn't calm the storm, it feeds it, because now they know something deeper. You care. And in the game of perception, whoever cares more loses. That's why Elliot Kane never explains. He doesn't flinch, doesn't tweet clarifications, doesn't sit in interviews justifying his silence. He lets the noise echo, because he knows something most never learn. If someone throws fire at you and you don't burn, the crowd doesn't question you, they question the flame. And that's how you flip the power, by choosing not to explain, but to outlast. It starts with a question. Not a real one, not one meant to understand, but a trap, carefully wrapped in curiosity. Oh, why would you do that? Are you sure that was the right call? Is that really what you meant? And you answer. You explain, you justify, you try to win back the frame, but by then, it's already gone. Because here's the thing they never told you. The moment you respond to their frame, you accept their authority, not over the facts, over you. You say, without knowing it, you have the right to interrogate me, and that single gesture, subtle as it is, hands them control of the room. It doesn't matter if your answer is perfect, even if it shuts down every doubt, you've still played on their field. And now everyone is watching your defense, not their accusation. That's how people lose power in plain sight, not with a scream, not with a scandal, but with one soft sentence. Let me explain. Elliot Kane learned this the hard way. At 32, he sat in a boardroom, accused of manipulating internal figures to boost investor confidence. All eyes turned to him. And what did he do? He leaned back, unmoved, didn't even blink. He didn't say, "That's not true." He didn't say, "Here's the full context." He said nothing. 1 minute passed, then 2. Eventually, the accuser kept talking, clarifying, repeating, losing rhythm, and slowly, the room shifted, not because Elliot said anything, but because he didn't. Because he refused to legitimize a question that never earned his attention. That silence, heavy and deliberate, told the room everything. He wasn't trying to be liked. He was demanding to be feared, and fear always silences doubt. See, people think power is volume. But real power is composure under pressure. You don't control the narrative by speaking, you control it by deciding which questions matter. And once you learn that, the world stops putting you on trial. Because they know you'll never enter the courtroom. They wanted a reaction. That's always the tell. The words may come dressed in logic, concern, or even care, but underneath, they want to see you twitch. They want proof that they've touched something raw, so they throw a jab, a comment, an accusation, and wait. Because if you flinch, if you speak too soon, you validate their frame. But what if you didn't respond at all? What if you just watched? That's what Elliot Kane does. He calls it the mirror move. You let the accusation sit, not with tension, not with anger, but with calm stillness, like it didn't even land. And then something strange happens. The silence doesn't stay silent. They start to squirm, they double down, they explain, they escalate. But they're not attacking you anymore. They're defending themselves against a mirror that reflects their own instability. See, when you don't react, people start reacting to their own emotions. They hear themselves louder, they notice the echo, and in that echo, they begin to doubt. Did I go too far? Do I look petty? Why isn't he saying anything? That's when the balance flips, because now they're the one in motion, and you're just watching. You've given them nothing to hold onto, no pushback to push against. And that makes them louder, sloppier, more exposed, because in the absence of your defense, their attack becomes a monologue. And nothing is more revealing than a one-sided fight. Elliot used this at a dinner once. A rival leaned in and said, "Must be nice having people clean up your messes." The table went quiet. Elliot didn't move, didn't smile, didn't blink, just let the sentence float, long enough for everyone to hear the bitterness inside it. And the man, he tried to explain. It was a joke, of course, but it was too late. The mask had already slipped. Because Elliot didn't have to reveal anything. He let the other man do it for him. That's the mirror, and it never lies. They call you arrogant, cold, detached, manipulative, and your first instinct is to say, "No, I'm not," to prove your intentions, to clear your name. But Elliot Kane does something different. He inverts. He turns the insult into a flashlight, shining back at the one who threw it. Someone once told him, "You're too confident. You act like you're above everyone." He smiled, calm, measured. Strange how confidence unsettles people. He replied, no sarcasm, no heat, just detachment so clean, it cut through the room. The man blinked, looked around, laughed nervously, and that's the moment it clicked. The insult didn't say anything about Elliot. It revealed everything about him. That's the technique, the cold inversion. You don't defend, you don't attack. You make them explain why they feel the need to say it in the first place, because 9 times out of 10, what people accuse you of is just a reflection of their discomfort. You show ambition, they call it ego. You show clarity, they call it manipulation. You show boundaries, they call it selfishness. But when you don't shrink from the label, when you don't reject it, you force them to wrestle with why they need you to be smaller. That's the power. Because now they're off balance. They expected pushback, but all they got was stillness, so they start justifying their accusation. "I didn't mean it like that. I'm just saying," and each word exposes them more. You didn't dodge. You didn't parry, you made them trip on their own sword. Elliot once told a junior exec, if someone accuses you of being manipulative, and you rush to deny it, they've already convinced the room you are. But if you look past them and say, if that's how you see it, they'll question everything, including themselves. See, the goal is not to be cleared. It's to be unfazed, because people don't respect those who need approval. They follow the ones who don't seek it. And in the end, that's the most unsettling thing you can do, not resist the insult, but wear it like it doesn't matter. Because when something doesn't shake you, people stop trying to throw it. stillness is not silence, it's presence sharpened. The way Elliot Kane enters a room, people notice, not because he's loud, not because he commands attention with words, but because he doesn't rush, doesn't fidget, doesn't look around seeking approval. He simply is. And in that stillness, there's a pressure, a weight, like he sees everything but chooses to say nothing. That choice is power. Most people, when faced with tension, fill the space. They talk fast, they justify, they explain. But Elliot does none of that. He lets the silence do the work, and silence, when carried with presence, doesn't feel empty. It feels loaded. In meetings, he's the last to speak. Sometimes, he doesn't speak at all. And yet, people remember what he didn't say more than what others screamed. That's the paradox. We think words make impact. But in truth, stillness leaves the deeper mark, because when someone's not reacting, your brain starts working harder. You analyze, you speculate, you wonder. That gap between stimulus and response, that's where influence lives. Eliot once said, "The stillness unsettles people because it makes them face their own noise," and he's right. The longer you stay composed, the more they fumble, because they don't know what you're thinking. And when people can't read you, they overestimate you. They fear what might come next, what you could say, what you could do, but haven't. And that restraint becomes mystique. Power doesn't always look like force. Sometimes it looks like a man sitting with perfect posture, hands calm, gaze steady, while chaos unfolds around him, because in that moment, everyone in the room starts adjusting to him, not because he asked, but because he didn't. Stillness makes people bend. Without a single command, sometimes the strongest move isn't to speak, it's to vanish, not in anger, not to punish, but with precision, with calculation. Eliot Kane once said, "The loudest collapse happens in silence, not yours, theirs." There was a moment, months ago, when a journalist ran a hit piece, half-truths, shadowed accusations. The world watched, waiting for his reply, but Eliot never responded. He didn't issue a statement, didn't post a quote, didn't even acknowledge it. He kept showing up, silent, sharp, unmoved, and over time, something strange happened. The article got louder, but only to itself. The journalist started tweeting more, then did interviews, then posted screenshots, trying to get a spark, any spark, but the silence stayed, and without a reaction, the noise began to echo back on itself. People lost interest, then started questioning the motive, then questioning the writer. Eliot didn't block, didn't delete. He let the storm rage, and simply stepped out of the rain. That's the art of strategic disappearance. You don't defend. You don't argue. You deny them the thing they need most, your energy, because most people, even in conflict, aren't looking for truth. They're looking for reaction. They want proof they got under your skin. So when you vanish, you starve their narrative. And when a story has no oxygen, it burns itself out. That's when the spiral begins. They text again, they reach out, they ask others, they create new drama, and every move they make makes you look stronger, because now the audience sees what's really happening. One person is obsessed, the other is untouched. That contrast creates tension, and tension builds myth. Eliot doesn't just disappear to protect himself. He does it to make them visible, because when you remove yourself, you force the chaos to reveal its source. And that's how reputations shift, not with confrontation, but with absence that speaks louder than presence ever could. They expect you to fight. That's the setup. Throw a label, watch you squirm, watch you explain. But Eliot Kane never plays that game, because he doesn't defend, he redirects. His words aren't shields, they're scalpels, cutting precisely. When someone says, "You think you're better than everyone," Eliot replies, "No, I just don't think like everyone." A calm, direct, no effort wasted. That's the difference. These aren't comebacks, they're closures. They don't invite debate. They end it. Another time, a board member said, "You're full of yourself." Eliot didn't lean forward, didn't tense. He looked at him, neutral, measured, and said, "A confidence upsets the insecure." A no raise in tone, no blink, just still precision. And suddenly, the room didn't see Eliot under attack. They saw someone else reacting emotionally. That's the flip. When you speak to shift the frame, never to repair it. There's a list of phrases Eliot keeps sharp, short, final. No air for reply, noted. Okay, think what you like. Is that how you see it? Time will tell. Each one is a full stop, not a comma, because the more you explain, the more you feed their need for control. But when your words are deliberate, cold, concise, complete, you own the tempo, you dictate the exit. This is what Eliot mastered, the art of speaking only to reclaim control, never to chase understanding. Understanding is optional, control is not. And the man who chooses his words like weapons, he doesn't need to raise his voice. Because by the time he speaks, the room already knows he's won. Most people spend their lives trying to be understood. They correct, they clarify. They chase perception, but Eliot Kane doesn't chase anything, because he knows clarity doesn't build power, mystery does. He's not the loudest in the room, he's the least predictable, and that makes people watch him more closely. Not because he demands attention, but because no one knows what he'll do next. That's what makes him dangerous. Not his presence, his unreadability. When people think they understand you, they plan around you, they prepare responses. They shape their strategy, but when they don't know what you're thinking, they hesitate. And hesitation is leverage. Eliot never argues online, never drops long captions, never explains what he really meant. And because he doesn't, others do it for him. They speculate, they defend, they argue in the comments. While he stays quiet, that's power, not because he silenced them, but because they chose to speak on his behalf. The ones who tried to tear him down, they look unstable, obsessive, loud, because the longer he stays still, the more dramatic they become. Until the public sees the imbalance, one man untouched, the other unraveling. This is the paradox. The more you explain, the more alone you appear, but the less you explain, the more people feel drawn to protect you. Eliot plays this with precision. He doesn't ask for loyalty, he creates the space for it. Because people will step forward to defend what they believe is unfairly attacked, but only if that person remains calm. Still, above the noise. That's not just reputation, that's elevation. He built it quietly, one wordless moment at a time. And now, his name moves through rooms he never walks into, not because he shouted, but because he never needed to. You don't need to be liked, you need to be unshakable. That's what Eliot Kane understood. While the world taught people to explain themselves, he studied restraint. While others chased approval, he built an aura, not through branding, not through force, through discipline, discipline over reaction. Discipline over the need to correct, clarify, or convince. He once said, "A power isn't just presence. It's presence with nothing to prove." And that's the shift. When you stop playing defense, you stop being the target, because targets move. But monuments don't. They are too heavy, too silent, too certain. And when the noise tries to hit something that doesn't move, the noise collapses on itself. That's the evolution. You don't fight to win arguments. You design yourself so well that no argument can reach you, not because you're hiding, but because you've made clarity internal. You know who you are, and when you know that, you don't ask others to see it. They either do, or they don't. But either way, you stay still, because stillness makes the crowd whisper. Stillness makes people careful. Stillness turns a man into myth. That's what Eliot became. Not a hero, not a villain, a presence. One they couldn't define, so they respected it. You want that? Start now. One word less, one reaction skipped. One moment of stillness in the storm. It won't happen overnight, but stone by stone, you'll feel it build. Until one day, someone throws a jab, and you don't even blink, not because you're cold, but because you've trained yourself to need nothing from them. And in that moment, they'll feel it, the shift, the weight of someone who answers to no one. And all at once, you won't be explaining who you are anymore, you'll be defining it.